It's no secret that things are tough right now for men in their occupations. The world hates men. Finding a good job and an affordable home is nearly impossible. Finding a faithful wife who's not a raging feminist outside in the culture and sadly even in the church is nearly impossible. And there's been more than enough get it together sermons and speeches to go around. So, when it gets down to it, if you want to have a healthy life that you love, what are the practical steps to accomplish that? It's easy to just say, go to the gym and try carnivore. But for men and Christians especially, the answer is much deeper than that. This episode is brought to you by our premier sponsors, Armored Republic and Reece Fund, as well as our Patreon members and our faithful donors. You can join our Patreon by going to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries, or you can donate by going to rightresponseministries.com/donate. So if you're tired of being the lowest on the totem pole, we are about to discuss some great places to start to change that. Tune in now. We're back. We're
Gentlemen.
back. All right, real quick, Nate, go to the top of the chat. Here we go. I'm going to do a shout out for everybody who's an early bird here. We appreciate it. We've got Javin Johnson. I don't know. Johansson.
Here we go.
All right, he says, here we go.
Probably
Thank you
Javin.
for hopping in. Siege D. He gave us a super chat right out of the gate. This episode could be terrible. And he's just believing. He's just hanging on to faith. He says, howdy, Pastor Joel. I've been binge watching your sermons and podcasts lately, and they've been helping me a lot with my faith. Thank you again. Thank you. Appreciate it. Vlad, super faithful and consistent. You're here for pretty much every live. We super appreciate that. Thank you. Evan, Christ is King, upright response. Thank you, Evan. Statistics, man. Something tells me I need to go to the gym after work. That's probably true. Wes, his ministry is to berate and humiliate you into the motivation of doing good
Just
things.
subtle. I don't even say it outright, like go to the gym. It'll just be subtle things like,
It won't be subtle. He will publicly on X mock you while being employed by you.
I was like, I'm going to get fired for my tweets. It was bound to happen.
There's nothing subtle about it. All right, Neville, he says, what up, my wasp? That is true. We are white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That is technically true. Thank you. Stryker, he says, good afternoon, GA, my man. Anybody else go down?
T. James Boone.
Who is it?
T. James Boone, another live stream.
Yay, another live stream. Thanks, T. James. Kenton Little, God bless you. He's faithful. He's always here. GA, fellas, he says. GA to you, Kenton. Who else do we got in the chat? MRBR. He says, Rudy from Dallas. Rudy, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you. Corey says, Jesus Christ is your God. That's his name.
Yep.
Jesus, I love that. He's not just my God. He's your God. Whether you bless him or curse him, love him or hate him, he is your Lord. He says, GA, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Corey. Thanks having you with us. Then who else do we got?
Well,
I think that's
T.
all.
James Boone says also buy Bitcoin,
And that's fair.
which does not constitute financial advice.
Yeah, I
from
said
this,
something about
like,
grandmas buying Bitcoiners in our last, and people thought that I was against Bitcoin. I am not. I'm pretty heavily invested. I'm a believer. No, it's not that I'm against. My point was with anything, there's a certain point where it becomes so pervasive that you know that the cycle is kind of in, that you're probably there's going to start to be a sell-off. And so when grandma, right, when you're visiting grandma and she asks you, when she's getting her wallet and physically in an analog fashion trying to plug it to the outlet, in the kitchen and saying, can you get me some Bitcoiners in my wallet? Then it's like, okay, we're about to dive here. We've hit the top, the ceiling's in. All right, that's everybody. Do us a favor. So everybody in the chat, we just gave you a shout out. So you do us a favor now. Share this video. Please, please, please share. Give it a thumbs up, like the video, trigger the algorithm, but also we need guys sharing it. Share it on YouTube, share it on X. Let's get it going out as much as we can. All right, that's everything. If you're following us for the first time, tune into this episode. You're not already subscribed. Subscribe to the channel. Click the bell so that you'll be notified. And make sure to also follow us on X, where there is less suppression. Our handle is @RightResponseM. @RightResponseM. Okay, Wes, go.
All right. This is one of my favorite topics. I love talking about strength and men. The Proverbs go so far as to say the glory, in a good way, the glory of young men is their strength. Yep. They're strong, and that's a good thing. I don't know who I heard this from, but this is how I want to frame the discussion. Men should pursue strength. Women should pursue beauty. We've said that before. So men should pursue strength. Women pursue beauty. And both of these qualities in the early years of life, they are the most on display. So young men at their 20s and their 30s, they are the strongest, they recover the best, they have the most energy, aggression, ambition, all of those things. And it's the same thing for women. Women are most physically beautiful in their early years of life with attractiveness, all of those different things. So you have physical strength and physical beauty, but they fade. If the goal for life was the glory of young men as their strength, and that's all there is to attain to, all there is to look at, well, what do you do as you're 50, 60, 70? You don't recover like you used to, and you can't lift like you used to. If the goal was just physical strength, and that was the only quality that we could describe men as, well, we'd end up, well, as you get older, you just wouldn't be of much worth. If the worth of men is in their strength, worth of women is their beauty, as they get old, they wouldn't have any use in society. But someone framed it this way. They said, okay, there's that physical strength and physical beauty at the beginning. What they're meant to translate into is a spiritual strength and a spiritual beauty. Now, you can put this first graph on the screen. And I think this is profound because it helps us avoid falling into a very truncated, simplistic idea of men when we say only physical strength.
All right,
so you can
real
see
quick,
here,
is this a chart that you made?
This is a chart I made.
Oh,
right
my
from the top.
Look, here's the deal. Right from the top rope, Wes's chart game
it's
off the charts. His chart game is off the charts. And remember, literally the whole world has improved because of charts. A chart saved the life. Seriously, if anybody belittles charts, just remember that the reason why there is hope for the next generation right now is because a chart saved Donald J. Trump's life.
And since then, Wes has been chart maxing.
You have to see this.
You got to be chart maxing.
Yep. All right. So in this chart, I just graphed it. You've got on the red, you see for men on the left and for women on the right, you've got the physical strength and beauty, and it just declines. But spiritual strength is a quality and a virtue that you'll be cultivating your entire life. So for men, that's discipline, that's self-control, that's strength of character, and that's courage. So that physical strength is meant to give way to. As you get older, as you mature, as you are more sanctified into being a godly man, you have incredible strength. Not physical grip strength or squat strength, incredible strength of character. That's what you pass on. The Proverbs, when it says the glory of young men is their strength, it then says the splendor of old men is their gray hair. It's their wisdom. It's their character. It's all that they have to pass on. We're not talking about women as much in this episode, but it's the same for women. Women will cultivate as they mature, not physical beauty, but spiritual beauty, the beauty of the soul. They're warm, they're inviting, they're patient, they're charitable, they're delightful to be around. And so as you think about men in this physical strength, all that to say, some men just won't be. I've come to realize this. When I was younger, I didn't think of these categories. Just some men won't necessarily have that high level of physical strength. The Apostle Paul and the Apostle John, they didn't have Planet Fitness memberships at the end of the day. And if we're so simple as to kind of think of only those categories of physical achievement, of endurance, and all of that, we're just going to miss. God has designed masculinity, manliness, to have a little bit of variety to it. Now, there's Paul, there's John, there's also David, and there's also Joshua, right, and there's also Christ, men of war, strong, and that's awesome. But at the end of the day, there will be men that can't be strong for some reason. There will also be women that are not as beautiful in their youth. So those aren't meant to be the enduring only mark, masculinity, femininity. Now they are good and they are virtues in early life to have, but they're intended to give way to those virtues later on.
That's a good point. So beauty for women, strength for men are not the exclusive mark of femininity and masculinity, and they're certainly not the enduring mark. So not exclusive and not enduring.
Right.
But they are, we could argue, they are the initial mark, and they're also the most natural mark. And
yes.
And I think the point that Wes is making, and it's a good point, is that by virtue of these things coming first in life, coming early in life, in youth, and coming most naturally, it's one of God's way if it's natural, then it's something that he made, he designed. It's a part of the natural order. And nature is the second book. We have special revelation, but we also have natural revelation. That's one of the ways that God speaks to us. So the fact that beauty for women comes early and comes naturally, and strength for men comes early and comes naturally. In a sense, it's not that they're the exclusive marks of being a man and being a woman, or the enduring marks, but they're the initial and natural marks, and they're meant to signify. It's like God's flare, shooting up. It's God's signal, his message to us that sets the course of what to then pursue in the spiritual realm. Men, you are by nature physically strong early in life, and then that's God cueing us in to pursue spiritual strength, to pursue that direction in the spiritual realm. Women, you are beautiful by nature, early and naturally. And that's God cueing you in, directing you of what direction to pursue in the spiritual category. And for women, spiritually speaking, we're going to focus on men today, but just to get it out right here at the beginning, 1 Peter addresses this. 1 Peter, I believe it's chapter 3, that says that women should be beautiful in the sight of God with an imperishable beauty. So beauty is fading, right? Beauty is fading, charm is deceptive, beauty is fading, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And so we're not saying that these are enduring, and we're not saying they're exclusive qualities, but they're natural and initial, and they set the course of what direction to pursue in the spiritual regard. And so for women, it is beauty. It's a lifelong pursuit of beauty. It's not always going to be physical, at the same way, the same degree, and the same ways that it was when you were 30. It's not going to be the same when you're 70, but it is still going to be beauty. That's the path that you're going to pursue. And so then it's, well, what does enduring, imperishable beauty look like for a woman? And God is incredibly exceedingly kind and merciful. He spells it out with immense clarity in 1 Peter, and says that the imperishable beauty of the heart, not just skin deep, but there's internal. So now we're talking not external and perishable, but internal and imperishable. That kind of beauty in the sight of God, an internal imperishable beauty, is defined by two primary characteristics: a gentle and quiet spirit. And so what is it that a woman is pursuing? She's pursuing gentleness, and she's pursuing a quiet spirit. She's not pursuing being aggressive. Be aggressive. No, that is not her pursuit. Her pursuit is not to take down the libs in the public square. Her pursuit is not winning all the debates. Here's something that, we've talked about, Michael and I, as we've talked about classical education and what we want that to look like for our children. It should it be the same for men and boys? Like, I think of C.S. Lewis at the very beginning of, I believe it's The Silver Chair, it's Jill Pole and Eustace, and it's like the first few pages where they're going to this school. He calls it the Experiment House, or the Experiment School, and of course, there's your headmaster is a woman, and he's saying that she's terrible, and that checks out. And the part of the experiment is that they are educating boys and girls together. Right. And C.S. Lewis is mocking this and saying this novel, modern, drivel of boys and girls going to the same school with a female headmaster. This is insane. And so I think about that, like, even with, as there's been a resurgence of classical Christian education, do we want, for instance, in the realm of debate, rhetoric, do we want to train girls, 16, 17-year-old girls, to take down their opponents with facts and logic on a public platform as there's an audience and everybody's watching? I don't think we do. I don't think that we want girls to be wise. We want them to be intelligent. We want them to be learned. But do we want them to engage in polemics? Do we want a woman to be publicly polemical? I don't think so. I think I think that we would prefer to see men do that. Like. Right. The last thing I'll say on this, and I want to be careful because I am grateful in the providence of God, He has used women, and I'm grateful.
Because right now, desperate times call for desperate measures. Things have gotten way off the rails, and there have been some courageous women who have helped. But I'll say it like this. I really loved Shepherds for Sale the first time I read it, when it was written by John Harris.
By Meg Basham.
And I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that, and I'm not trying to disparage Meg. I appreciate what she's done. But I think it's a shame that John Harris didn't get more credit for his book when he wrote it. Right. We currently live in a world where even the conservatives, if the conservatives want to make a point, they put forward a woman. Yep. And if they want to make a point about race, they put forward a black guy. And I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying it until conservatives can actually be conservative. If a white male has the goods, he's got the goods. And John Harris had the goods. He kept all the receipts, and Meg Basham, to her credit, she publicly acknowledged John, because when she was writing her book, she was reaching out to John Harris, left and right, because John Harris had the receipts. Mm-hmm. But my point is, I'm grateful for what she did. I don't want to disparage her. But how come John didn't get as much notoriety? It's because conservatives aren't conservative. We're not. And so all that back to my primary point is, yes, we want women to go to school. But as they're being trained, do they need to be trained in the direction of aggressive, polemical, fighting, taking down the libs with facts and logic? Or is that something that is inherently masculine? And so that's my point, is that God sets the course. You're right, Wes. God sets the course initially and naturally for men by giving them physical strength, with women by giving them physical beauty. And then that is God's indicator, should be God's indicator to us of what then to pursue with a lifelong pursuit in the spiritual realm. Men pursuing spiritual strength, women pursuing spiritual beauty, and in the case of women, pursuing spiritual, imperishable, internal beauty of the heart. He literally spells that out for women, saying that it is the quintessential marks of that spiritual feminine beauty is ambition. No, it's quietness and gentleness. So,
Michael?
Yeah. The other thing with John, and this is not to dismiss what you said, Joel, but part of it too is that Megan worked for the Daily Wire and had inroads into the established conservative community.
Totally. And all I would say to that is, maybe I should just leave it.
Okay. I was going to say about your chart, Wes, the other thing that chart helps us with is we are going to be prioritizing and commending strength and health, right? So that's the thrust of this episode. But I know there's the concern bros who say, well, if you focus on strength, then that's just worldly, that just leads to tyranny, that just leads to toxic masculinity. And the thing about that chart is that we know if a Christian man's strength has been virtuous strength, if it leads him to that increase of spiritual strength as the two decline and then cross, and then the spiritual strength increases. Like, God has given the Christian man and the Christian woman an indicator of whether they were exercising the natural virtues of strength and beauty properly, and that is if they lead into spiritual strength and spiritual beauty properly. And I think it's really a beautiful picture that God has given. And you can look at a man's life. We're so short-sighted. We think, well, that guy worked out for this long for half a year, so he's going to be beating his wife and kids. Well, no, we evaluate people over their lifespan.
Right.
And so you look at a man who disciplines himself in his youth for strength and for virtue, and then you see, oh, lo and behold, he's a spiritually strong and resolute man in his age. And that's how you know if that man was pursuing virtue and strength in the proper way in his youth.
That's a good point.
All right. So if you asked me a couple of years ago then, all right, I'm a man, and I just, it sounds a little clickbaity, but I just want to be happy, healthy, and flourishing. A couple years ago, my advice would have been like, well, it would be physical strength. It would be the gym, this, that, or the other. But as I've gotten older, what I've come to realize is that what's more important than cultivating physical strength and health necessarily, men have to win. if you take one idea away from this episode, if you remember one thing, let it be in this first segment, that you as a man, you have to win somewhere. Testosterone is the molecule that makes men men. It doesn't just give them like their strength and recovery. So your strength and recovery is better if you have higher testosterone. It also gives them their ambition. It gives them risk taking. So men that have lower testosterone take less risks. It's not just purely a molecule that helps them lift heavy weights and puts them down. It gives you focus. It gives you drive. It gives you libido. It gives you energy. It gives you ambition, aggression. Everything that makes men men is tied up in testosterone. The same thing for estrogen for women. So when it comes to testosterone, again, you can have higher or lower. And it's not just genetic and it's not just diet or everything like that. Men winning gets them higher testosterone. I'm going to read a study here. This is from 1992 in the journal Hormones and Behavior. Winning, losing, mood, and testosterone. I'm just going to read. You can see the DOI down there if you want to look at the full article. This is from the abstract. This is a summary of what they found. So they did 2 experiments. In 2 experiments, male college students either won or lost $5 on a task controlled entirely by chance. So this isn't even, I'm putting skill, I'm putting training, I'm putting energy in. Task controlled entirely by chance. After the task was completed, winners exhibited significantly higher testosterone levels than losers. Levels of cortisol, hormone associated with stress and arousal, did not differ among the groups, suggesting that a hormone behavior response pattern for winning and losing is specific to testosterone. These data suggest that winning can alter testosterone levels in men and that mood may mediate such changes. This research is played out. You look at dopamine studies of actually lobsters. Jordan Peterson's written a lot on that. And the key idea is that men are meant to take dominion, and you have to take dominion somewhere. If you worked a dead-end job, and you worked it for a nagging woman who was a manager, so you hate life there, you're not doing anything productive, and then you come home and you're in a home where your wife and kids don't respect you, and then you do a hobby that's forgettable, like video games you're not very good at, and you repeat that cycle for years and years and years, you lose at work, you lose at home, you lose in your hobby, you have no ambition, you don't take dominion, control, anything, anywhere, you are going to be miserable, unmotivated, undriven, and forgettable. That is just a fact of life. God created men to take dominion. As they conquer, as they win, some men you're not going to win everywhere. You live in a small town, just the job you inherited, it provides your family. Okay, maybe you don't do something necessarily important in your job, but then in personal life, is your family run well? You're having kids that love you. You're doing once a year something backpacking, ambitious, travel. Are you starting a side hustle? You have to win somewhere to be a man, and that
I think that's
winning
part of the reason why guys do play video games. I don't, but
likewise.
I am sympathetic to guys who do. I think obviously you can play too many video games and be an utter loser, but I think part of the reason they do it is because they're losing so much in real life that they want to win somewhere, right? And so because their real life is they're working for the cackling hens in the HR department at their woke company that
making charts.
Yeah, so then they come home. And so then they come home and they're doing something, even though it's virtual, something with swords, and fighting dragons and that, like, they're trying to find some place where they can win in a world that has made it very difficult for men to win.
Question, Wes, because and it might be the case. So set me right if I'm wrong. But what I would hear some guys, or what I would think some guys would hear from what you just said, is I have to be actually winning some sort of physical or mental contest against men. And I'm wondering if you think, like, even I'm gonna set out to climb that mountain, right, and achieving something. Is that tangential? Is that related? Is that the same sort of, like, I'm winning a goal, or I had an accomplished or a task that I was going to learn woodworking, and now I've made a bed for me and my wife, and, like, that sense of accomplishment. Are those related? Are they different, do you think?
I regret to inform you, it is some level of competition against others, because men sort well into hierarchies. Right. So if you had a team, like a sports team or whatever, men would self-select and they recognize who's team captain. Men do this really well. It's one thing that women don't do well, but men do well. And so there is a certain level, like, I'm trying to lift this much. If you just did it and your goal was like, I'm only going to be competing against yourself. But if it was really just kind of like, I'm just going to do this, nobody else knows, nobody else cares, it's actually tougher to motivate yourself than if you were to compete against others. To say, I want to do better than this person at work. I want to lift more. I want to be, better at this, better at that. typically it is comparative against other men. And men recognize you're not putting them down. If you train and you run faster or do a Murph quick or whatever, it's not necessarily putting them down, but it's how men kind of recognize, yeah, he put in the work. He's a champion. He's disciplined. Continue.
Well, Scottie Pippen was never going to be Michael Jordan, right? But that didn't mean, I would imagine, that his satisfaction in being the right-hand man to Michael Jordan, like, would have been incredibly motivating to him.
David and Jonathan.
Yep.
At the end of the day, David's gonna hold the throne. And that's the thing, is men that are mature, they can say, man, I see what my CEO does. I can't do that. But man, if I'm not a good operations oversight.
It's one, like, there is what you're saying, Michael. I think, like, some level of contentment of just being on the team, and maybe you're a second, or a third. But it's also, I think, like, not just recognizing hierarchy instinctively, but also self selecting and categorizing. That because of that drive towards competition, what I think men instinctively do is they'll see someone who's better than them, and at one level, that sense of competition will rise up within them, and so it'll spur them on to try harder so that they can beat their opponent and be better. On the other hand, though, if it becomes clear, and it usually becomes for many men clear early on, they're able to self-select early. Okay, I'm never going to beat him in this. Well, then they'll quickly, instead of wasting a lifetime on mediocrity in one field, they'll go ahead and move to something else where they can be great, because men want to be great. They want to be great at something, whereas like the alternative to that would be just being content to be mediocre. And so, so everybody's kind of doing the same thing, and there's, and obviously not everybody can be the best, certainly not at the same thing in the same category. So then the vast majority of men would have to settle for being second rate. But the beauty of the world that God designed is that it's a multifaceted world. And so not every man can win in one category, but barring, obviously there are, some exceptions, and, like with certain, diseases or like there are always exceptions. Well, I'm a quadriplegic and I'm listening to this and I don't feel like you were sympathetic. And
right.
Look, we understand there are exceptions, but I'm saying in a general sense, God has so designed the world to have so many distinctions and to be so multifaceted. And he has also created people to be to have a variety and to have distinctions and differences, and because of God's good and wise design, the majority of men can win somewhere. They can't win everywhere, but they can win somewhere. So it's finding that place, finding early in life, better sooner than later, but as early as possible, being able to identify where it is that you fit and where you thrive and what you're best suited for, and then pursuing that with everything you have to be the very best of that. And so I won't be able to compete with so and so on this field, on this plane, but I can do this thing over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the things that we use, we mentioned video games, but TV is another big one. Social media, especially an infinite scroll feature where you can scroll to your heart's content. Those give little bits of dopamine. So you can imagine someone that's starving, what they really want is dinner, but there's kind of a breadcrumb trail of crackers. Right. Like it's food, it's something. What I really wanted, what I really needed was a big meal, but it gives little bits of dopamine, and you'll get like fake achievements. Like it'll be a mobile game. It will be, I watched a TV show, and vicariously through the character in that, I get the dopamine, the enjoyment of watching someone conquer and do that. And there are millions and millions of men, even Christian men, and that's all the satisfaction, all the victory they get. They watch TV, they watch movies. It's the bug man hooked up. He scrolls infinitely. He never challenges himself, never expands outside of his comfort zone, never takes risks. And then he gets to the end of his life, and it's just, there's not much to show for it. He didn't win it much. And then his kids look and they're like, I don't really want to be like Dad. Right. Dad never tried to do anything different. Dad never tried to leave his job. Dad never tried to get anything for us. And instead of you leading and demonstrating that, and the kids being like, man, Grandpa, he was awesome. You've robbed them of teaching them that, instructing them that, cultivating a good work ethic. And so don't settle for the crumbs, the little bits, the IV drip of dopamine, but do the hard work that has the payoff of literally biologically testosterone, dopamine, drive, ambition, etc. All right, we'll go to our
good.
first commercial break, and we come back. We're going to talk about muscle mass and more.
Our sponsor, Private Family Banking, wants to help you with one money move that'll implicate itself in multi-generational wealth building starting the first day. They help you to avoid taxation and to draw compound interest to your money. Now, if you're a high net worth individual, someone who has maybe even $10 million in net worth, then they can help you even more. W-2 workers, contract workers, business owners, it's all about cash flow and making tax-deferred gains on all your money for the rest of your life. Don't avoid this. It's a big move, but it's a great time to make it. Click the link below and you can get on Chuck DeLauderante's calendar and he'll go over your background and what you want to accomplish. And he's going to help model a program that exactly fits your needs. So go ahead and send an email to chuck@privatefamilybanking.com. Again, that's chuck@privatefamilybanking.com, or you can click the link below. Make a free discovery call now.
America is a country that was founded for the purpose of allowing Christians to do their duty before God and not to have their consciences ruled by the doctrines and commandments of men. Reece Fund exists in order to see the 10 Commandments properly applied, not just as a plaque on the wall, but to actually be used in business as though they're commandments from God that we're supposed to obey. Our goal is to find businesses and to buy them and to build them up. We want to find manufacturing businesses and use them to make sure that we can maintain our capacity to do things here. Reece Fund, Christian capital, boldly deployed.
All right. Jonathan Johnson was like literally working out right now. Love it. Love to hear it. And so we're going to talk about muscle mass. So we gave all our caveats in the beginning. At the end of the day, it's not literally about you have to physically be able to bench 225, although it is good. But the way God has made the world, again, not in every case, at the end of the day, having muscle mass as a man is going to be better for your health, better for your body, better for your longevity. I'm going to play a clip here from a Sean Ryan show, just very briefly set the stage for what we're about to talk about.
It's coming.
So sitting is the new smoking. Sedentary lifestyle is now the leading cause of all-cause mortality.
Wow.
Yeah.
The leading cause?
It is the leading cause of all-cause mortality, meaning the greatest impact on the total number of deaths, what's called a modifiable risk factor, is sedentary lifestyle. I have a saying that aging is the aggressive pursuit of comfort. And most of us are aggressively pursuing comfort, and we are accelerating the rate at which we age. We have to stop thinking about stress as being a negative, all right? Stress can be very good for us. If you don't actually load your bones, they will not strengthen. I don't care how much calcium you take. If you don't actually tear a muscle, it won't grow. If you don't challenge the immune system, it will weaken. The worst thing that came out of the pandemic, second maybe only to the vaccine itself, and we can talk about that, but was residential quarantining, masking, and social distancing. You took human beings out of contact with other human beings. So what happens when that occurs? The immune system weakens, right? The body's very efficient. If you stop using something, it will forget about it. Right? If you put it.
All right. So that was his episode with Gary Brecka. If you want to watch the full thing, that's the Sean Ryan Show, episode 163 with Gary Brecka. But he just brings up the point. Muscle mass at the end of the day, it is something necessary at some level. That's how God has made men. And I want to tie this quickly to depression. Now, with depression, there are some cases. So I would go out on a limb and say I could cure 90% of depression cases with a gym membership, with some sunlight, some outdoor activity, and hard work.
You can also cure about 90% of liberal politic cases.
The same way.
That's right.
Like seriously, like it's you try to persuade and convince people through facts and logic and all the it's like facts don't care about your feelings. Well, feelings also tend to not care about your facts. But you get somebody who's a libtard and you just raise their testosterone level. It's like we weren't even talking about politics. We weren't talking about any of these things. All we were doing is raising your testosterone level by doing some exercises and doing this and putting in some good habits and good diet. And then lo and behold, they start voting Republican instead of Democrat. Yeah. It's like what changed? Well, you became a man.
They broke a sweat. They got some sunlight. They touched grass.
Yep.
And they're normal again. So I think a lot of depression can be cured by that. There is some depression, however, and there are men that have gone out and they've been active, engaged, and they do have chronic, lifelong depression, probably spiritual in nature. So I'm going to talk about depression, talk about all of these different things, but I recognize this is not truly something one size fits all. So this is, I'm going to pull up the second quote here. This is from a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is not just a single study. So someone goes out, they do a study with 100 people, they come back and say, this is what helped it. This is actually taking the average effect size from multiple studies, often across decades. So this is a meta-analysis, a study of studies on the effects of muscular strength and depressive symptoms. So this is from 2020, the effect of muscular strength and depression symptoms in adult. A total of 21 studies were included in the review, totaling 87,000 adults aged 18 years from 26 different countries. A lot of people. The systematic review findings suggest that muscular strength had a positive effect on reducing depression symptoms. Meta-analysis findings indicate that MS, muscular strength, is inversely and significantly related to depressive symptoms. And so you have right there the confidence interval association. Interventions aiming to improve muscular strength have the potential to promote mental health and prevent depression. This is all over the literature. Yeah. You have to understand God made men specifically that at the end of the day, strength is going to help keep them from depression, weakness, and just a lack of loving life, a lack of vigor, a lack of vitality, a lack of ambition. And so there will be men, they have less muscular strength, they're not depressed. We're not saying, of course, every single one. But the idea is, at the end of the day, that does show there is a relationship. That if you're experiencing this, it could be fixed by. And it's not a coincidence. It's not like, well, God could have made it one or the other. Could have been men preaching, could have been women preaching, flip a coin. No, it's designed that way. God made the world, and he said, this is what's going to be necessary for men to flourish and thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, I want to tie this to all-cause mortality. Okay. So all-cause mortality is not just like mortality from cancer or accidents, this, that, or the other. This is mortality across every single category of deaths. So same thing, this is another meta-analysis. This one from 2023. A study of 12,000 deaths among 81,000 participants with 3 to 14 years of follow-up. So looking at 12,000 people that died out of 80,000, what was true of them, what patterns can we pull out? Subgroup analysis showed that low skeletal muscle mass index, so low amounts of muscle that was attached to your frame, was significantly associated with an increased risk of all-cause mortality in studies with a body mass index between 18 to 25. So 18 to 25 is kind of the average weight. It's around 200 pounds, depending on your height. So for guys in there especially, all-cause mortality was much lower the greater muscle mass you have. This means you survived accidents better. This means cancer, if you underwent chemotherapy, you had more muscle mass that the chemo was able to hit and to target before you ultimately wasted away. So muscle mass, all-cause mortality, same thing, 25 to 30 and over 30. The statistical association strength, it gets a little bit less as it goes up, but the main idea is still holds through. Same thing with depression, same thing with all-cause mortality. Men have to do something. They've got to walk. They've got to work with their hands, work the garden, and model it too. So I love working out. One of the big reasons is my dad taught me how to do it. He was the one that we were always going on hikes. We were always climbing trees. We were always outside doing something. So even if it's for yourself, like, man, I recognize that I want to live long. I recognize I want to be healthy. I recognize I want to be vigorous, but it's tough. Don't just do it for you. Do it for your children, your grandchildren that are going to see that and go, oh, I know how to work out and I know how to hike and I feel confident enough doing that because dad showed me how to.
Yep.
Anything to add?
The only thing that I want to add is, and I know it's random, but Wes, you're about 10 years younger than me. And physically, you could probably beat me in just about every category except.
Don't say it.
I think that we should record this and literally just show it in an episode. Michael could record it, but I think I could beat you in tree climbing. As a 38-year-old grown man, and I know it's ridiculous, I admit, but I think, were you there when we were camping? Yes. Were you on that camping trip?
Yep.
And I scaled that
monkey mode.
I remember Connor, my brother-in-law, he was like, "What?
Yep.
What?" Because he was climbing it first and kind of like just slowly going up the limbs, and I was just sitting there kind of watching. I was like, "That's cute," you know. I remember my sister, you know, a very good wifely instinct. She was like, "All right, now you should race Connor," because Connor's like a marathon runner.
Yeah,
because she instinctively knew what Wes has been advocating this whole episode. She was like, "Connor needs he just got whooped in tree climbing. He needs to win at something. So now you guys go run."
Yeah,
because he would definitely beat me in that category.
I thought you were about to say chess. We played a good amount of chess.
Oh, you have never beat me in chess.
It's not close. It's not like he wins some and I almost win others. It's just you win.
Brian, whenever I go visit Ogden, Brian Sauvé, I'll just randomly pop into his office and sit down and play him in chess. And he's pretty good. He beats me. That said, though, I always beat him while we're playing chess. Not in chess, but in my mind, there's another game that he's not even aware of, another competition. And it's the competition of who has the most nicotine pouches while playing this game.
Who
of
has the
chess.
most pouches in?
Yeah,
Who has the most white hair in their beard?
Here's the point: you got to be able to win at something.
Yep, you got to be able to win at something.
Yeah.
The thing I was going to add, and I'm a culprit of this, is some of what we're talking about. So I did a little bit of research as to what the church has said about this topic historically, and we do have to admit that the church has not said a lot about this historically. Like there were even times right in the early church, the patristic era, where even physical fitness and bodily discipline was somewhat denigrated. You've got like the desert monks and things like that going on. But the church has not often said very strong and very positive things about manly strength. Yeah. And I think we just have to recognize that my theory is one of the reasons for that is this has not been a problem for a lot of history. Most men worked a job that at least kept them mobile and active.
Right. That's a good point, Michael.
This is something that is one of the things that is related to the time that we live in. And so it's not that we're going against what the church has said. Obviously, we would all agree that Paul said bodily discipline is of some value, but godliness is of great gain, right? None of us are going to disagree with that. Yeah. But also, we live in a time that is unique in history where most people sit for their jobs. And even the people that don't sit for their jobs, they drive to their work. If you're working at a factory, you're still driving to work, and then you're working at the factory.
Right. We're living in a culture today, and sadly, a lot of the culture is actually not like this. So if I'm to be a little bit more specific, we're living in a Christian church culture today that would take the words of Paul and actually twist and pervert the scripture. He says that physical training is of some value.
Right.
The church often either outright explicitly says, I've heard guys explicitly say this, guys in the Reformed world, or they at least implicitly communicate it, but they essentially convey that physical training is of no value. And we're talking about during a period of time historically,
right,
when you cannot depend on the physical training that would come naturally by your assumed manual labor position. So you're talking about a time where like the what was that movie? Wall-E?
Yeah, Wall-E.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's all the all the people are obese and overweight, and they're sitting in their floating motorized chairs, and we're living in that kind of era where because of technology and advancements and innovation, all these kinds of things, you don't have to be by necessity physically active, and so what happens is that we're killing ourselves, and I think the culture is recognizing this, the broader culture. And making some healthy adjustments, and even at a national political level with RFK Jr. and these kinds of things. But per usual, the church sucks and is last to the game. I think the church will probably really care and be doing podcasts like we're doing right now 10 years from now.
Right.
Like the church will put the woke away 10 years from now. The church will say that men should be physically strong, especially young men, 10 years from now. That in a nutshell, if you're wondering like what is Right Response Ministries about, in a nutshell, I'll tell you what it's about. What we're trying to do is uncover what the Bible actually says and apply it in relevant, applicable ways for our time, our place, and to do it, and maybe actually do it before the culture, to actually beat the culture for once for once. The church has been following the culture for decades.
Or at least part of the conversation while it's happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like guys will be like, well, yeah, but you're leading people astray. And what they don't realize, and we've used this analogy a million times, the rubber band, it's been overstretched and then eventually it inevitably will snap back. Nature is healing, as the kids say, nature is healing. There is an inevitable snapback, and it's not just something that will happen, it's something that's happening right now. It's happening. And with snapping back into God's natural order, there's a return to nationalism over globalism, a return to patriarchy over feminism, a return to hierarchy over egalitarianism. In all these ways, the rubber band is snapping back. And if the church is still just holding the line with enshrining the victories of 10 years ago, then what will happen is that the church will be over here saying nationalism is bad. The last guy who was a nationalist, also, he drank water, so you probably shouldn't drink water either. Patriarchy is bad, it's degrading, it's misogynistic, and so if the church is doing that, but the broader culture is snapping back, what will happen is that as there's this inevitable snapback that we're witnessing in real time, the Overton window is shifting at the speed of light, and as that happens, people will realize that feminism was a psyop, that it's a joke, and they'll snap back into God's natural design of patriarchy. But all the Christians, the church, because it's always lagging behind, will be over here saying patriarchy is bad. Well, why? Because my wife told me. Well, the elders of our church don't agree with patriarchy. Why? Well, because their wives told them. And so then what will happen is the culture will snap back to patriarchy. But the question is, it's not whether, but which. There will be a return to patriarchy. The question is, which patriarchy? It'll either be a pagan patriarchy, it'll be Islamic patriarchy. Like Andrew Tate, he went to patriarchy. Right. But because there was no Christians in that space to be found, he knew he needed something tried and true and old, something religious. He realized, okay, secularism, atheism is gay, right? Because he's masculine. I'm not saying he's holy. The dude's a pervert. He's a sinner. But he is masculine. Naturally masculine.
And young men love him for that. They love the discipline, the ambition, the competition, the drive.
And so when his natural propensity, masculine propensity, snapped him back into patriarchy, he realized feminism is gay, and also not embracing religion, being anti-religion, is also gay. Atheism is super effeminate and gay. That's cool if you're 14 years old and it's the 1990s.
You just read Nietzsche for the first time.
You're shooting videos of playing with a sword, and it's like,
who would do that?
Who would do that? Now Joel's describing someone very specific.
Yeah, there was a more base guy that did that recently.
That's true.
But he actually looked like he knew what he was doing.
But he actually looked like he could use a sword. Yeah, so there was a difference. But the point, that was not a reference to Wes Huff. I'm sorry. I didn't think about the fact that video landed today as we're recording that. I'm thinking about the other guy. Anyways, but the point is that atheism is gay and feminism is gay. Andrew Tate and a million other young men like him, following him, they realize that, and they're like, we want to go to patriarchy. And so it's like, all right, we want to embrace religion and we want to embrace masculinity, masculine religion. And so then they survey the lay of the land. And it's like, all right, what's the Christian option? Zero. There is none.
Don't look.
There is none, right? So then it's like, okay, well, what's the Islamic option? Oh, there is. There actually are masculine Muslims.
Right.
And so then he picked that. And so like that's what we're trying to do. Is I feel like the evangelical church is like Gandalf standing in the middle of the bridge, right? The third way, the middle way, trying to hold back the Balrog, right? And you shall not pass from globalism to nationalism. It's got to be a third way, something in between. You shall not pass from feminism to feminism is bad, but so is patriarchy. It's got to be some kind of effeminate third way option. And you shall not pass from, like egalitarianism is bad, but hierarchy, that's terrible too. And so they're trying to hold back the world, the culture at large, the entire world, in this middle way position. The problem is that that they're not standing on anything. There's no ground under their legs because God didn't create that world. The world that they're trying to salvage, the world they're trying to sustain, is a world that doesn't exist. It's not God's world. God's world is hierarchical, it is patriarchal, and it is national. And so there's this return to nature. And one of my concerns with this ministry, and a large part of what we're trying to do, is we're saying there are Christian options in all these categories. You want nationalism? Christian nationalism. You want patriarchy? Biblical patriarchy. You want hierarchy? Well, look at God's natural order. There's actually categories for all this. And the Bible, not only does the Bible teach us, but we have 2,000 years of church history that affirm these things. These things have been outlined by all the guys that we quote when it comes to soteriology, salvation, but we ignore them and think that they're racist, chauvinistic, whatever, when it comes to all their other views. And so there is a Christian position, but modern Christians are working really hard to convince you that there's not, that there's not. But what will happen is you're not going to persuade 50 million young men to be somewhere in between egalitarianism and hierarchy, somewhere in between feminism and you're not going to win that battle. You're not going to win against nature. Nature finds a way, right? The prophet from Jurassic Park, life finds a way. Nature finds a way. Nature will win, and Christians are literally going to get bulldozed over by the vengeance of nature. The vengeance of nature. And so we're trying to say, no. Don't fight against nature, but rather shape and direct nature. So as nature, which God designed, does its natural thing and shifts back into masculinity, nationalism, distinctions, hierarchy, don't work against nature, work with it, but coax it into the right position. Christian nationalism, Christian patriarchy. And that's like when people are like, people hate our ministry. They hate it. Oh my gosh, they hate it. And they just can't figure it out. They're like, I don't understand why you're succeeding. I don't understand why anybody watches Joel. I don't. It's because you're going against the grain and we're going with it. And when I say the grain, I mean the natural order that God designed, not the culture. That's how you sleep at night. You console yourself and Joel's only getting views because he's compromised and he's going with the world. That's cute. No, I'm getting views because I am going with the world, but not worldliness, but the world insofar as it represents the created cosmos, the world that God made. I'm going with God. I'm going with His design, His order, His plan, and I'm providing distinctly Christian versions of these things which are inevitable. And if you're not, I'm telling you, Christian minister, Christian pastor, Christian theological, seminary professor, you are literally working overtime to make yourself obsolete. You are. And not 50 years from now. There was a time where it's like, well, we can stay here inevitably, or indefinitely. That time has ended. The Overton window is shifting so quickly that I predict in 5 years, in just 5 years, and maybe 2 to 5 years, there are entire ministries that literally will be a walking contradiction. Like they won't even make sense anymore.
Right.
So. I wanted to mention, Joel, you talked about, sadly, the lack of masculine examples when people look at Christianity. And that is true, 100% true. But it has not always been the case in Christendom. So I did a little research into the knighthood system and the chivalry system. That was started actually by, you will not be surprised to hear this, but by Charlemagne. The knightly system in the 8th and 9th century was when knights were developed. And then the chivalric system was really in its heyday from the 12th to the 14th century, with leading up to it, and then its legacy enduring for a really long time. And for a lot of Christendom, the male masculine examples that were held up as this is a man to esteem and to honor were the knights. In various forms, whether it's the mythological knights with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table,
St. George,
or St. George, who goes way back, actually, like 400s even, or actual, historical figures like Charlemagne or other notable men. But what's interesting to me is that the high chivalry, what the code was for men and for knights in particular, and this was what was esteemed by men at the time, was one, martial skill. So they had to be able to fight. They had to not only be able to fight, but they had to have some knowledge, right? A knight could command troops also. He wasn't just on his own. So they had to have martial skill and ability. They had to have loyalty to one's lord, which I think is really interesting. That was a super high value for a knight. They had to have religious piety also, right? So you mean these men who were hacking people up in battle were religiously pious?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Like David?
Yes, that's
right.
Taking foreskins, just man after God's own heart.
They had to have courtly and proper behavior toward women, which is self-control, right? Like if they had the strength and the influence and even the armies, they could have gone around raping and pillaging, but they were commanded to be self-restrained and to treat women in an honorable and virtuous way. And then the last one was protection of the weak. And this is something that we totally forget. Like how, for all the liberals and the liberal Christians who talk about protecting the oppressed and the cry of the oppressed and all of that, like biblically, do you know who is supposed to actually carry out that command? It's the strong. You don't actually get the biblical virtue of compassion and mercy for the poor without the strength to be able to do something about those things. Right. And care for the weak has always been the duty and the privilege of the poor or of the strong. But in our time, most men are not strong or wealthy or resourceful enough to actually do something about the problems in their society. And so it's sad to me how far we fall. I remember growing up reading books about the knights and being really inspired about them. But it's sad to me that the knightly figure, the masculine, virtuous, martial figure has disappeared really from the Christian conception. When people think about Christianity, that's not what they think about anymore.
Yeah. Teddy Roosevelt, like a president in our recent history, he softened a little bit on women's rights and labor unions, which I credit more to the time. But man, that dude was masculine.
Yep.
Cold plunges, like him and his buddies would just get big sticks and just fight one another. Bloodied and bruised, goes and explores the Amazon after he loses his third bid for president. Like this isn't hundreds of years ago. Yeah. These were men that we loved like a century ago. And we didn't just love them because they spoke well. We loved them because they were strong but good. Strong and assertive but kind. Let's hit our last commercial break, and then we're going to deep dive seed oils.
All right, the clock is running out. You need to go and register now for our Christ is King How to Defeat Trash World Conference. It's happening the year of our Lord 2025, April 3rd, 4th, and 5th. That's a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And by God's grace, we're able to provide for you an all-star lineup. We've got Steve Dace, Calvin Robinson, Orrin McIntyre, Dr. Stephen Wolf, Eric Kahn, David Reese, Andrew Isker, John Harris, A.D. Robles, Dan Burkholder, Dusty Devers, Ben Garrett, C.J. Engel, and yours truly, Pastor Joel Webben. Come on out, join us April 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2025, Thursday through Saturday. Go to rightresponseconference.com to register today. Again, that's rightresponseconference.com. Listen, guys, you probably listen to Right Response Ministries because you take the dominion mandate offered to us in Scripture seriously. Well, unsurprisingly, so does Dominion Wealth Strategists. As the only distinctly reformed financial consulting firm, they help Calvinistic, covenantal, and confessional Christians to steward their resources faithfully in a way that actually aligns with God's Word. Dominion Wealth leverages all corners of the financial service industry as independent brokerage agents, matching you with suitable products and services from dozens of top industry providers. Their mission is to equip believers to secure their family's future and build a legacy that glorifies God by building holistic financial strategies that include budgeting, insurance, debt management, retirement planning, estate planning, and more. In order to make wealth Christian again with a portfolio that might even put King Solomon to shame, go and take dominion over your finances today by visiting www.reformed.money and book an introductory overview right now. All of Christ for all of life, and all of finance for Christendom.
You heard it been said once or twice, you should cut out, and it's a lot of different lifestyle things. We talk all the time about toxins that are in our food. They're in like literally your water supply. So fluoride being added. It's the very first episode we did actually. Fluoride lowering IQ. This, that, or the other. There's lots of toxins. And I think it's in The Office where like someone's like, at this point, I'm afraid to ask. So you hear about seed oils, you hear about sunblock, all these different things. You think to yourself like, what? Why are they bad? Like I know they're bad. People tell me about it all the time. But why are they again? And so I'm going to play a little bit, just for the record, my bona fides. I have a degree from Columbia University in biology, and I have a master's in epidemiology from University of Texas. I'm qualified to talk about this. But I want to get into why. And I think what's interesting is when you get underneath, like what's happening? Why are these things toxic? It really uncovers a cool aspect of God's sovereignty and just accepting how long God says we're going to live. And so the key thing, when we talk about these different toxins, we'll get into them in a moment, that you want to reduce, the key thing that leads to lower life expectancy is a thing called oxidative stress. Oxidative stress. Big word. I'm going to play a video. You'll also hear an explanation that'll explain a little bit more. We'll dive into what that means for men, for strength, for health, longevity, all of that.
A free radical is an unstable molecule that wants to steal an electron from other molecules or give its own away. This makes it highly reactive and destructive to important proteins and cellular structures, including your DNA. Free radical damage is also known as oxidative stress. Free radicals are normal byproducts of molecular processes in the body, and the delicate balance of their presence is beneficial for normal cellular responses and healthy immune function. But stressful lifestyles, poor diets, and toxicity in the environment increase free radical activity. Runaway oxidative stress disrupts many important cellular processes and is a factor in many unhealthy conditions. Your body keeps oxidative stress under control with antioxidants, which are molecules that neutralize free radicals. You can get many antioxidants through healthy nutrition, and even more through supplementation. And your cells are designed to produce their own.
All right. So the point and the idea is that we talk about things that are not healthy for you. And a big one is seed oils. This would be your canola oil. This would be your vegetable oil. This would be processed like peanut oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, things like that. Palm oil. Sunscreen as well that contains different endocrine disruptors. What they build up in the body is an abundance of these things called free radicals. They're these destructive, highly charged things, and they can disrupt your DNA and your mitochondrial functions. Well, why does that matter? Well, P53, for example, is a gene encoded in your DNA that suppresses uncontrolled tumor growth. So if P53 has damage done to it, the cell mechanisms that are there don't repair it for one reason or another, you would get a tumor that grows and grows and grows, and that's cancer. So all of these different things coming in, the more you add to them, it's not adding a binary. Yes, I'll get cancer. No, I won't. Yes, I'll get sick. No, I won't. But what you're adding to it is probability. So a healthy lifestyle, it's not I'm healthy or I'm not. I'm eating good or I'm not. I'm active or I'm not. But think of all of these things, men's health, men's strength, all of this on a continuum. And what you do is you do the best you can to give yourself the best chances, not a guaranteed outcome, but the best chances of living a healthy life. Nate, can you pull this graphic up? The big things that men you got to learn to avoid, you got to learn to keep under control is really a poor diet, eating a poor diet. You've also got to, chronic stress is a big one. Now stress, it can be good or bad depending on how you respond to it. Same thing for sleep. God made sleep to repair, to get rid of toxins, to build up those body's defenses, the antioxidants that the body has. Same thing for environmental pollutions. This would be your pesticides, so food that's not organic. This would be your smoking, excessive alcohol consumption. You can go down the list. These are things that add oxidative stress to your body. And again, the goal is not I can get rid of all of them and have none of that coming in, or they're just going to be coming in whatsoever. The goal is how can I minimize that? And then you go to what mitigates that? What gives me antioxidants? What helps take care of that? And that would be things like a healthy diet. We're talking your good fats and some fruits and vegetables. Managing stress effectively. So saying at the end of the day, hey, I'm stressed out about this job, this interview. I'm going to leave it to the Lord. I'm going to get a good night's sleep. Alcohol, smoking, limiting them, maybe not cutting them out entirely, but limiting them, quality sleep and good exercise are factors that mitigate this. Now, at the end of the day, like I said, it's probabilities. There are people who smoke a pack of cigarettes a day.
That's right.
They get no lung cancer, no throat cancer. They live till 90. And there are people, I had a good friend, his mom was in her 60s. She ate grass-fed beef all the time. They had a garden out back. And she had a rare aggressive form of cancer and passed away before she even saw many of her grandkids. At the end of the day, it is up to the Lord. But typically speaking, on average, the means that God generally is going to give longevity to an individual is they live the way God intended. And in that way of living reduces the risk of cancer, immune sickness, organ failure, all of these different things, reduces the risk of that. And they go on to live a much more healthy, much more productive life. And so when you think about, you're talking about these toxins, you're talking about all that, what's actually at the core of it? What's happening in my body? How do I get rid of it? What do I avoid? Reduce these things as much as you can, reduce that stress, have good habits, which aren't pills. Like our Western medicine idea is, I take a pill for something, I take a supplement for something. There's not a pill to go out in the sun and touch grass. There's not a pill that can duplicate the effects of exercise, like Ozempic. It doesn't do it. It shortcuts a critical circuit in the body, and there's a lot of side effects from it. There is no substitute. But the good news is,
loss drug, right?
Exactly.
Quote unquote.
But the good news is, eat steak, eat eggs, eat milk, go outside, love life. Like Donald Trump does not exercise, eats a terrible diet, but he is energetic, engaged, high energy.
Plays a lot of golf.
Stays active. He's flourishing.
Yeah.
So there's no excuse for you in your 30s. He's 79, playing golf, working. He doesn't sleep much either.
No, he doesn't.
These are not rules that, like, if I follow these things, I'm going to make it happen. You also got to love life and be an active person.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Real quick, can we talk about, could you talk to the listener a little bit about epigenetics?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Wes?
I love this topic.
Yeah, because basically, I'll just say something real quick and then I'll say more later. But so, in Proverbs where it says, that a good man, or some translations will say a wise man, leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And of course, the typical Reformed pietist is that's a gospel inheritance. Nobody's arguing that it's less than a spiritual inheritance. Certainly, we should be training our children and our children's children in the things of the Lord. And so, yes, take your kids to church, catechize your children, lead family worship in the home, get your kids out of public school, give them a distinctly Christian education. All those things are a bare minimum. And so it's nothing less than a spiritual gospel inheritance. But I do think that particular proverb is including more. In addition to a spiritual inheritance, that we would also leave a financial, monetary inheritance, not just for one generation to our children, but to our children's children, our grandchildren. But I never thought about this before talking with you, Wes, about the subject, but I actually have come to the conviction that I think that it's actually possible, and none of this, for the record, is the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel of, healthy and wealthy and wise. Health and wealth, prosperity gospel, just in a nutshell. The problem with it is, one, that it asserts that these things are guaranteed and that they're entitled to us, that God owes us. And number two, another big problem is it asserts that there's a shortcut outside of the world that God actually established, that you can achieve wealth and health simply by faith and not real, genuine Christian faith, which has as its exclusive object the Lord Jesus Christ, but where faith becomes an end in itself, where I have faith in my faith instead of faith in Jesus. So I'm not really trusting in Jesus. I'm actually trusting in trust. I'm trusting in the power of positivity. It gets into weird things like manifesting, just by, putting out positive thoughts into the universe, and then you just give it a thin Christian veneer and you call it Christian doctrine, but it's the prosperity gospel, which is a heresy. So we're not asserting that. We're not saying health and wealth in your Kenneth Copeland kind of fashion, but we are saying that, yes, we do want to be healthy and we do want to be wealthy, but we want to do those things as a means to an end, the highest end being glorifying God and enjoying Him forever. We want to do that not just for ourselves, but for future generations, for our children and our children's children. And then in terms of the means of achieving these things of health and wealth, we want to do it God's way, in God's world, according to the natural order that He designed. So in terms of wealth, we want to do it by wise investments and hard work and being frugal in our spending and those kinds of things. That's not bad. That's good. The absence of that would actually be bad. And so too, we also want to do that with health. But the whole point that I'm building up to is this: in the same way that that wealth can be transferred, right? So it's not just making yourself rich, but there's such a thing as generational wealth, that you can leave that after you're gone to someone else, namely your children and your children's children. I really have come to believe that both biologically and biblically, that there's a way of passing on not only wealth to our children's children, but health to our children's children. Can you spell that out a little bit?
Can I, because we're going to focus down on that. I wanted to make just a tangential comment about what you said, Joel, about how when the Bible says the righteous man, the godly man, leaves an inheritance to his third and fourth generation, or second, third generation, and you said, oh, there's even more applications than just gospel, right? Or even, which was what we're going to get into in a moment, just money.
Right.
I actually have a theory that the more we understand about the world over time and about ourselves and about God, the more we're going to realize that the things that He says are manifold in their application. And I'll give you one example. I remember I was listening to a scientist who was talking about the passage in Psalms that describes that the earth is established on pillars. And he was saying, for a lot of my life, I thought this was beautiful poetry. He said, and then I studied astrophysics, and I found out that there literally are two gravitational pillars that are holding the Earth exactly in place: Jupiter's pull and the sun's pull. And without those two gravitational pillars literally holding the Earth, it would be spinning off into space. And he said, the point is, of course, it means that the Lord sustains it. But he said, the more we dig into nature, and the more we dig into the Word and the way that God has made the world, the more we will find that when God said something, it probably is rippling with many applications throughout all of the universe. And so to that point, which you said, the verse about leaving an inheritance, it is a spiritual inheritance. It is a monetary inheritance. And Wes, you're going to talk about how it's also a biological and health inheritance.
Yep. So I'm going to dive in. We'll do this. I'll dive in. Quick word about the conference, and we'll take questions. I've seen a couple already, and that's what we'll finish up today with. So the field of epigenetics is what you're talking about, and specifically transgenerational, so across generations. Your DNA, most of it goes unused in the day-to-day. So it's not as though you have this entire genome and all of it at every single moment is being transcribed and used to make proteins and everything like that. There's whole sections of it that are not in use at one time or another. And then this DNA, the discovery has been, this is a great book called Deep Nutrition. So you can read, this is about nutrition by Catherine Shanahan. Deep Nutrition, Catherine Shanahan. Genes can be turned on and off, sometimes truly off. So for example, like your hair, like the reason your hair turns white is because the protein that deposits the dye can no longer be made because of genetic damage. So as you age, genetic damage accumulates, you lose the protein that makes the dye or whatever. So they can be turned.
With my beard
and it's happening with up top with me.
Hey, real quick, close up on the beard.
Close up on the guys. This is not a present progressive for me.
Nathan,
Yeah.
Zoom in, enhance. No, that's good. So one of the funniest comments that we get regularly is people will say that I dye my beard. And I'm like, they have never watched the show.
You're dyeing it gray.
At this point, I'm not 50-50 salt and pepper yet, but I don't know, maybe the audience can weigh in, but I think I'm about 25%
in the
there.
stinger too, you can tell there's like 50% less.
Yeah, because that
white
was
hair.
about a year ago.
Yeah.
And shamefully, I'm getting a lot up top and I'm only 29.
All right, back to you. I'm sorry.
All right. So genes can be turned off, on, totally binary. It's on, off, but they can also be turned on and off to varying degrees. This is accomplished when DNA is wrapped around what are called histones, that it can be wrapped around and turned off. Now, what you can do, what happens, we're understanding now, as some of that DNA is taken in the man and the woman and then packaged together for reproduction, is you pass on what has been turned on and turned off. So genes, for example, for inflammation. Inflammation is mediated by these different biomarkers. And you can have a greater propensity that gene can be turned on and you can experience chronic inflammation. And this would happen because of DNA damage. This would happen because of oxidative stress that we talked about. It would happen because of lifestyle. You would do different things, you would live a certain way, and that would contribute either to flourishing, so to genes that are repairing well, because there's genes that make proteins that repair genes. So you could live a healthy lifestyle. They're not experiencing much damage. The genes that repair genes are working well. Or you could destroy your life through your living. This would be alcohol, smoking, drug abuse, promiscuity. These things at a genetic level destroy people. And the point that Joel's talking about is it doesn't just happen in you. So it's not as though I could destroy my life, sire 5 children, and it would have no impact on them. IQ, 60 to 80% just straight up inherited from their parents. Longevity, a lot of it is genes, like literally living long.
When you said the lady who smokes, a pack a day and then never
gets lung cancer,
anything like that likely is because of the genetic material or legacy that she inherited.
Like living long, a lot of it is genetic. So we're not just talking about like I pass on eye color and hair color. You will literally be passing on to the degree of faithfulness that you exhibit and that God grants you in this life will then be carried by your children, and they will either have an inheritance that they can build from to live longer, be smarter, live healthier, flourish more, or you pass them down something that can lead to lower bone density, worse vision, increased aging. You can not ruin your kid's life, but you can really set them up worse, or you can set them up better. And what's cool, like you were saying, Michael, nobody knew this in Proverbs. Solomon did not have this idea of like, well, I've got my guys in the lab, they're cranking, look what we come up with. But you live right, the way God made man to live, that even in the fall.
But they said it inspired by the Holy Spirit, and it was true.
The Holy Spirit knew.
They couldn't, exactly, they couldn't tell you how, but they knew what. They knew that this principle that I'm conveying right now is true. The Holy Spirit knows that it's true. And later generations of people will find out how. Like it's the glory of God to conceal a mystery, but it's the glory of kings to search it out. And,
exactly.
And Solomon searched out, as a king, a literal king, searched out many mysteries in his lifetime, and many more kings have come later and have searched out further. Yep. But it is true, and everything that you're saying, it compounds. You correct me if I'm wrong. You're the biologist, but it compounds even more over generations. And so not just with one individual. So I can have some effect, but it'll be relatively minor in terms of my immediate posterity, the very next generation of my children, in terms of my life habits and diet and exercise and all these kinds of things. But if you have, for instance, 10 or let's say even 20 or 30 consecutive generations of healthy living, good diet, and it's not just diet, but it's diet, it's exercise, it's sunlight. Also with that would be the avoidance of sexual promiscuity. All these things are going to affect your health. So if you have like 30 generations of really what we're describing is 30 generations of Christian living. I know I've given this example ad nauseum, but it's so good and I like it. So Treasure Island, right? So right now, we're always reading books to our kids, and I think it was about a year ago we read Treasure Island. It was a year ago, right, Nate? Because we went, our families together, we went and visited Ogden, and I was reading it with your kids and mine. Yeah, it was a year ago, and which, by the way, my kids are tiny tots. We've got 5 of them. We're in the little years, and Treasure Island is. I'll just say this: to make it land home, we had to go and watch Treasure Planet. A few times throughout the series, because it's actually probably like a 7th or 8th grade reading level. Treasure Island. It's old, some old English, but anyways, the point in the book where Jim Hawkins finds the cabin boy. They're on Treasure Island, and he finds the marauder Ben Gunn. Who had been marauded by Captain Flint previously, marooned 6 years prior by Captain Flint. He had survived on the island, but one of the first things that he does when he finds another living, breathing human being, namely Jim Hawkins, is he says, "Please, sir, these 6 years I have been without a Christian diet," and he calls it a Christian diet. And I understand that it's obviously it's fiction, But the author who wrote it at the time still had some semblance of like that term Christian diet came from somewhere, and so that was a real concept in the mind of, if no one else, the author. To say nothing of these fictional characters. But so then he begins to ask for eggs and cheese and milk, a Christian diet, because he's been without these things for 6 years. And then furthermore, he goes and says, "My mother did not raise me to be a pagan, but she raised me to be a good Christian man. And I've been without, a Christian diet." And so my point is, just theoretically, let me cook for a second. Let him cook. Theoretically, if you had a Christian civilization, let's say, in large part, Europeans, for centuries. So
it's hypothetical, purely hypothetical.
Purely hypothetical. I'm sure this has never happened, but let's just say that like there's one continent in the world, almost exclusively, for centuries, not just decades, but centuries, to where you're talking more than 10 generations. You're talking 20, 30 generations from, King Alfred, which I'm sure he wasn't a real person. All of this is hypothetical, but, for 1,000 years, Christendom, if that was a thing, and it touched one particular part of the world, namely Western Europeans. And their religion, they actually applied it. And it wasn't just spiritualized. They weren't just pietists, but they applied it more than just the abstract, but in the real world, so that it affected everything: their parenting, their marriages, family, but also even their physicality, their lifestyle, their habits, and their diet, what they ate. Let's just say religion maybe has something to say about diet, like all the dietary restrictions in the book of Leviticus and Numbers. So let's just go with me for a second. Let's say that a society, a civilization, embrace these things, put them into practice, not just for one generation, but my whole point is that it compounds over consecutive generations. Let's say that happened for 1,000 years. If that happened for 1,000 years, would there be higher lifespans for that people and that part of the world? And let's say that there were other peoples in the world where, instead of, for instance, eating cow, they used in their diet cow dung, or they were cannibalistic, or
vegetarian,
or there was a lot of substance abuse, and they worshiped demon gods and used drugs to do it, like peyote and things like that. Or let's say that they were sexually promiscuous, and had multiple different partners, and would that affect the physical body? And here's the thing: if that has an effect on the physical body with epigenetics and shutting down certain genes and unlocking others in positive ways and negative ways, and it happens in a compounding, exponential fashion over multiple consecutive generations, would that affect, in affecting the physical body, would the results of that be perhaps even more than just lifespan, how long you live, but would it affect even strength, for instance? Or I'll go a little bit further, is the brain, the mind, is the brain a part of the physical body? Could the brain be affected over 1,000 years of consecutive generations of not eating poop, literal poop, because there are people who do this, but eating things that are healthy and practicing monogamy? And then in addition to that, furthermore, getting rid of rat infestations and creating sanitation processes in sewers, right, which was a Christian innovation, sewers. So through sanitation, medical advancements, good diet, good exercise, and doing this consecutively, all stemming from the Christian faith over the course of 1,000 years, not only, strictly theory, of course, not only would those people per capita perhaps have elongated lifespans where they live longer, but because the brain is a part of the body, could they even also have higher IQ than other parts of the world? Just throwing it out there. In other words, here's the point. God did not create a bland, ugly, homogeneous world. God created a world that includes distinctions in every fabric of the natural order, including people, at an individual level, but also not just people, but peoples. However, this can be affected, I believe, this is my theory, over time by bowing the knee to King Jesus. I believe that over time, not just in your lifetime, but a wise man, right, transferred wealth, generational wealth. He leaves an inheritance to his children's children. You can also do that with health, not just leaving an inheritance of wealth, but also health to your children's children. And if you have consecutive, faithful generations that have applied all of Christ to all of life, even the physical body, through diet, exercise, all these different things, and you do that for 10 generations, 20 generations, 30 generations, I believe that your posterity will live long in the earth, right? The first commandment with a blessing that comes with a promise, the fifth commandment, honor thy father and mother, looking to your father and mother and the wisdom that they had and embodying that in your generation and passing that down to the next generation by honoring your father and mother and chiefly honoring your heavenly Father and applying his word to every realm of your life, that you would actually live a long, relatively longer life in the earth than other peoples. And I think that you could be stronger, and I think that you could have a higher IQ. I think that all those things are possible. And note, none of that is racist for two reasons. One, because racist is a made-up word, and we shouldn't use a left's framework. And two, because what we're ultimately saying is we're giving all the glory and honor to God and saying that God's word is true and it works. And if any people called by his name would humble themselves and look to him in obedience and faith, then they will be blessed in eternal ways, guaranteed. But very often, because God will not be mocked, a man reaps what he sows, they will be blessed even in earthly temporal ways as well. Yeah. I don't think that that's a crazy theory.
C.J. Engel was saying he was looking at high school pictures from like his grandparents, and you could just see in the people a healthiness, sturdy, stern, strong, like good jaws. Like we eat a very soft processed diet, and it's resulted in a lot of recessed jaw lines, which then teeth get crowded, so people have to pull teeth and do braces. Like there was a generation before that they didn't need that, because they had a Christian diet. They ate meat, which developed strong muscles, which led to palate expansion. So many things you don't even think. I'm just feeding my kids Fruit Loops. I know it's sugary. I know all of that. What's the damage it could do? Well, it turns out bad, even to their kids, to that level.
Wow. Yeah, my last comment before we maybe go into some questions, if there are some, is, I guess it's two. Number one, this is why I still remember when a pastor told me, I said something to the effect of, I don't think I had the term Christendom at the time, but I had the Christian culture that has been established by the West. I said, don't you see that it's fading? And he said, well, so what? And I just thought, like, how do you, this is why Christian culture, which we talked about last episode, matters, because you're sending your children into the future, and hopefully you're sending them into a future Christian culture, which is going to safeguard their children and their eating habits and their work ethic and their sexual practices. And the second thing I was going to say is, if we haven't made this point clear to the listener, we want to be healthy and live a long lifespan in order to see our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. But if you're a young person, it is really critical that as you're coming into childbearing ages, that you really take this seriously, right? Because your health as a man when you conceive your child, and then your health as a mom as you bear that child, and even as you nurse that child, because breast milk plays a lot into it, is really critical. And so if you're still young, before your childbearing age, take this seriously now, because it will reap tremendous benefits to your children and your children's children.
There's in that book, Deep Nutrition, she talks about mothers that are have a lack of nutrition for like the first one, and then it's a boy versus a girl. Like the girl can actually get higher doses of testosterone, resulting in masculine features. Yep. You wouldn't even think, like, it would be birth order and undernutrition, all of these things. Yep. And then you have women that struggle with PCOS, for instance. Like that's not something natural. It's the result of a deficiency at some level and a lifestyle choice. Maybe that wasn't even immoral. I didn't know. What was this? And you set someone up for a lifetime of, I'm going to have to deal with, slightly more masculine features. It can affect fertility. Like it all really does matter. And saying, I didn't know is not a valid excuse. Joel?
I wrote this just a couple of days ago on X, but I just wanted to share it with our listeners because not everybody follows me on X. But for those of you who are watching live, if you're not just listening to Apple or Spotify after the fact, we put up our handles from time to time. Nathan does a cool little nifty graphic. I'm sure he could do it now. So if you want to follow, all three of us are on X. Michael has recently succumbed to peer pressure and joined us. So I would encourage you guys. It's at mbelch. That's for Michael.
ML.
At ML Belch. And then for me, it's at Right Response M. And then for Wesley Todd, it's
Wesley_Todd_.
Great. So anyways, I wrote this for those of you who don't follow us on X. If you are curious, I said, God did not create a bland, homogeneous world. Instead, he made a beautiful world filled with distinctions, order, and natural hierarchy. And the fabric of this design runs through every part of God's creation. Inevitably, distinctions will produce certain disparities. Responding to these disparities with jealousy and bitterness is sin. Likewise, responding with baseless animus, rooted in pride, is also sin. However, recognizing the mere existence of disparities and understanding that many of them, though not all, since oppression and exploitation are real categories, but many of them are simply the effects of natural distinctions created by God, is not sin. Both humility and charity embody the proper Christian response. Humility on one side, charity on the other. Disparities do not, nor have they ever, necessitated injustice. The mere existence of disparities, they do not, nor have they ever necessitated injustice. Disparity can be created by injustice, but it also can exist simply because someone has chosen to be faithful, someone else has chosen to be disobedient. It also can exist because God, he has his prerogative. Now, this one is not even necessarily my view, but I will say in terms of arguing from a principle, in terms of principle, it is also well within God's rights to create unequally. He does this, we see with plants, with animals. He can do this in any fabric of creation that he chooses to, and it would not be unjust or immoral for God to do so. Now, whether or not that is the case ultimately is up to God, and I think you would have to do a lot of study and a lot of research in order to come to that conclusion thoughtfully. And if you do come to that conclusion, in terms of your heart posture and disposition, having come to that conclusion should be a posture of both charity and humility. And if that's the case, then it would not be sin. It would not be sin for you to hold to that view. But for me, for myself personally, and I'm not saying I'm right, but this is just my view, I absolutely do believe there are distinctions in every single element of the created order, including peoples, that come by faithfulness and faithlessness. I absolutely believe that at a bare minimum. And I think that to not acknowledge these distinctions and their corresponding disparities as they exist amongst peoples is ultimately a level of ignorance that I think bears moral culpability. At this point, I think there's too much evidence to not recognize disparities stemming from distinctions among peoples. There's too much evidence to the contrary that to not recognize this is not mere ignorance, but I think a form of lying. I think that it's deceitful in order to appease the spirit of the age, our world that holds as the highest grievance that anyone could ever commit, being racially biased, and to give in to that spirit of the age, I think is a sin of which I have been guilty of in the past, and I want to be courageous. I don't want to be unhinged, and I also don't want to be obsessed, but I do want to be courageous in that area. And I think that biology and epigenetics and diet and all the things we're talking about today do have something to do with that subject, and that's why I brought it up.
Amen. I'm going to say a brief word about the conference, and then we're going to hit comments.
Okay, conference. So some people have asked, we are going to have a singles event, and it's going to be organized. We've done this in the past, but it's been just a little bit more organic. This one's going to be organized. We have our administrator who's going to be heading it up, and the whole purpose, it's going to be designed not just to, just ad lib and
Throw a bunch of people in a room together.
Right, yeah,
hit the blend button.
It's going to be kind of like a speed dating scenario where you're actually getting to have one-on-one conversations and intentionally even the seating. We're not going to do a big circle because that kind of invites group discussion. Instead, it's going to be tables. We just looked at the venue this last week and did a tour, and we're making decisions with the venue coordinators. And so we've actually booked a room just for this function, and we're going to be setting up tables and chairs facing each other, and you're going to be going down the line and get to talk to every single person of the opposite sex that's there, and have a couple minutes with each in order to dialogue and to see if there's a spark, to see if there's interest there. And so we're really excited about this event. Nathan, are we charging anything for our singles event? Okay.
Just to show you care.
Yeah.
And then women $1.
Okay, so Nathan said that that what we're doing is for the
New Christendom did the same thing.
yeah. So we're taking a page out of New Christendom's book, which for the record they've done their conference. When I went in June, I thought this is great, and I love this conference so much. It's great to go to this conference twice. The first time when we did it, and then the second time when New Christendom did. But in this case, we are taking a page out of their book. And so what they did was they charged $50 for men and $1 for women. And the reason for this, part of it is men bearing responsibility and those things, but also part of it is just practically the ratio. We're going to have a lot more men at our conference than women.
If you're a single young lady and you're on the fence, come out and check out the conference.
Yeah, come out. And so for the women, it's $1. For the men, it's $50. And the hope is that would maybe even the playing field a little bit. But I've already officiated one wedding from a man and a woman who met each other at one of our conferences. And I have no doubt that in God's merciful providence, there'll be more. So the answer to the question is yes, we are going to have a singles event. Do they need to register ahead of time for that, Nathan?
Just same website, there's a separate ticket. So they can, even if
Okay.
they registered for the main conference, they can go back and register.
Okay, so if you've already...
They have to come to the conference.
Okay, so you have to come to the conference. You can't come to just this event. So you have to register for the conference. And then on that same page for registering for the conference, which is Right Response Conference, not ministries, but rightresponseconference.com. If you scroll down, you'll also find where you can register for the singles event. If you guys registered months ago for the conference, God bless you. But you're just now hearing about the singles event and you'd like to participate in that as well, then you need to go back. So go back to rightresponseconference.com. You're already registered for the conference. That's great. But in addition, go ahead and register for the singles event as well. And again, both the conference itself and the singles event, you can register for both by going to rightresponseconference.com.
There's a cap overall.
There's also a cap for the singles event, and it's filling up because the room is fairly large, but still limited. And so, what are we close to meeting that cap, Nathan? Are we halfway there? What's up?
We need more women.
So we need more women right now. So if you're a single woman, men is almost capped. Yep. So for the men, it is just about capped. We need more women, so that the men are not just hanging out with each other. So if you're a single woman and you want to get married, your chances are fantastic by coming to this conference because there will be a lot of men. Okay.
All right. I'll hit the first one.
questions? Okay.
I know it by heart. Does Wes have a course? I would sign up for it if it was on Patreon for making charts. I don't. It's called The Crucible of Management Consulting, where I made PowerPoints for a living. Don't know what to tell you. You gotta learn that one on your own. I don't have a course.
So they're going to go to this other company where you...
No, it's what he's saying. He did that for a living.
That's how
He
I
had
learned to
learn
make
it
charts.
in his years of
Joe
work.
somebody
Petruzzi
asked.
was like, Wes, do you have a course on charts? I go
I
exec
see.
for tier Patreon. I regret to inform you, it's not that easy.
Gotcha.
This is School of Hard Knocks, folks.
Yep.
What? Say it again, Nate. Oh, Nathan wants me to read a super chat. Nathan wants me to read a super chat just so that I can tell a generous donor that he's wrong. So Baptist 702, we do appreciate you, Baptist 702. Thank you for this. He gave us $5 and said, charging men more than the women is just going to take away incentive for men to attend. Women actually attend these things more than men, so men should be charged less. Nathan, what do you think? Do we have significantly more men registered than the women? Yeah. So
now, general networking. If you were to
we
do it in
will
Austin,
take your $5, and also Nathan
If it was
said
like a
you're
singles
wrong.
dating thing or just a speed
Yes.
dating thing, yes, in general, women come out to
right?
that
Women
more.
do go to those
Right.
more.
But these,
Right? Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
That's
At
a good point.
based
So,
conference.
yeah,
Yes.
Baptist 702 exactly. So if this was only a singles event being put on by just some neutral
Yeah.
group in the city of Austin, Texas, then you're right. But this is a microcosm. It's a subculture of a conference
Yeah.
that's going to probably be 80% attended by men. So that's why you're wrong. But we appreciate you giving us $5 and then also paying the $50 for the singles event. So thank you. All right, there was another super chat.
that was from the
We already got
beginning.
that
We
one.
read
Okay,
it
all
already.
right, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Wes. Any
Neville
other questions?
said, I don't know if he's being funny, but what if you start out weak and ugly? Do you get more spiritual beauty and strength?
By the end, maybe.
It'll be the school of hard knocks. You have to learn it one
Yep.
way or the
You
other.
can.
Yep.
Absolutely. I do believe that there's such a thing as the late bloomer. And but the question is just what do you do with weakness
Like if you just
and
get a bad lot.
ugliness? Yeah. So like if you start
The
off
guy
as a
in
man,
Captain America.
right? If you start off as a man and just
Steve Rogers.
genetically,
Speaking of genetics and faithfulness,
Right.
genetically.
yep. If genetically as a man you're 25 years old and you're one of the weaker guys in your peer group, you know, or you're a woman who's 25 years old and you're not as physically attractive as many other women your age. Well, the answer I think to that question is just what do you do with the providence of God? The providence of God. So you know the old expression that says time heals all wounds. That's true and false. Jesus heals all wounds, not time. However, Jesus tends to take time to do it. So the time, it does not heal all wounds, but Jesus who does heal all wounds, heals all wounds in time. And so the question is, are you clinging to Jesus? So the woman who is less physically attractive or the man who is less physically strong, the question is just how that's the providence of God in your life for whatever reason. He's sovereign and infinitely wise, and everything he does, everything that he ordains, Romans chapter 8, he does for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. So the question is, what do you do with that providence? So receiving that providence alone, just having the providence alone, does not guarantee that because I'm a woman who's less attractive than many other women my age, that I'll therefore have, just by default, when I'm older, I'll have more spiritual beauty than those other women, and they'll just by default be more vain. No, you can be a physically beautiful woman in your 20s and a spiritually beautiful woman in your 70s.
Right.
And you can be a physically strong man in your 20s and a spiritually strong man in your 70s. And the reverse is, I would say, by today's standards, the reverse, I think, is sadly true more often than not. That so when you think of like culturally and politically, when you think of the left, like there's something to be said for physiognomy.
There's a lot to be said.
There's a lot to be said. Like, so, you know, like for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, you know, think like old Disney, you know, like Snow White, right? So Snow White, she's fair-skinned and she's beautiful and she's innocent, and the physical portrays the external portrays the internal, right? So externally she's fair, the fairest of all in all the land, and internally she also has virtue. And then the witch, it's not just that the witch is evil, but there's a portion of the film where she also she looks externally hideous and ugly. And there's something to be said for that. Like when you think of who's on the left, well, there are some Hollywood actresses and movie stars and supermodels. There's a truth to that. But there's also a lot of 300-pound, blue-haired trolls. There's a lot of those too.
Yep,
There is a lot of, like, even when you think more like have you noticed, like with lesbians, for instance? So that is inherently immoral. Internally, it's ugly. It's immoral. It's against God's law. But externally, lesbianism does tend to appeal to women who are externally less attractive.
More masculine. They have more masculine features,
More masculine,
which is also
external
genetic.
features. And then internally, they also then choose to embody that. So the question is, am I going to allow the external to dictate the internal? So if I am a man in my 20s and I'm less physically strong for whatever reason, genetically, it's not just because I'm lazy, but it really is God's providence. What am I going to do with that providence? How am I going to respond? Am I going to lean into Christ and pursue spiritual strength? Or am I going to be bitter and angry and pursue effeminacy? And then same for the woman. So it's not a default mechanism, because I think the church has kind of said that, not explicitly. I don't know anybody who's explicitly said it, but I think that message has been generally conveyed, that if you're a woman who is physically, externally unattractive in your youth, well, that will just automatically produce virtue in your old age. Attractive, and then they grow in to becoming older women who are internally unattractive.
This is something, I think it's maybe newer, because I remember my grandparents and even my parents talking about how single women who never marry can become very ugly women in their old age. I think this is something that older generations had a better handle on than we do now.
And physical health leads to, if you're healthy, you're not in pain, you're active, that's also going to lead you to, generally speaking, you're going to be more patient, you're going to be more charitable, inviting, generous. Like we always have this idea of the jock. Well, there's the jock, and he's strong, and he's handsome, and he's good looking, but he's rude. The reality is most people that are generally good looking, successful, they're often pretty kind and generous at some level. Not every single one, but at some level. That's why physical health often lends itself towards type of spiritual warmth and kindness.
Well, and that's honestly, like, people have used this phrase before, and I think it's again, not in every individual case, but generally true, that a lot of the oppression that we've experienced has been the results of living underneath a theater kid occupied government.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You've probably heard that phrase, theater kid occupied government. That at some point, what happened, I said this in a sermon months ago, and people loved it. People hated it. I got a ton of flack. So naturally, I'll go ahead and say it again. But you know how we've used the phrase "nature is healing." The rubber band is snapping back into place. The anti-bullying campaign in America that has been very popular through pop modern psychology and all these, and Christians have adopted it as well. There's a way of being mean-spirited that is immoral. It's wrong. Mm-hmm. But there's also a way of God's natural order being asserted among human society, and what we did through basically every film, through Hollywood and social media, and at every level in our culture, what we did over the last couple recent decades is we have glorified the nerd and demonized the jock, right? So, that's
because you've got 19-year-old nerds running around absolutely trashing the Treasury Department right now.
Right. That's true. But like, I remember it was a few years ago, but there was a TV show called, what was it called? Pied Piper was the name of the business that the guy started. It was a nerd.
I don't watch slops, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember the name. He started a company called Pied Piper. Somebody's going to put it in the chat, I'm sure. I hope somebody's going to put it in the chat.
They don't watch slops, so they don't know.
Yeah,
they don't watch slops.
And they're a tiny bit delayed.
But anyways, the point is, I think it was Vogue magazine or something showed.
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley. There you go. Silicon Valley. So I think it was Vogue magazine did as a cover on one of their issues, the 4 male characters from that show, those actors, and they were all standing in a line, like basically spooning each other, but in a standing position. And they each had their hand in the guy directly in front of them, his pocket. instead of their own. And the caption, if I remember correctly, because it was iconic. It was iconic in a disgusting way, but it's iconic nonetheless. It stood out. But the caption was the year of the beta male.
The rise of the triumph of the beta male.
triumph of the beta male. And the triumph of the
And
beta
they're wearing
male.
like sweater vests
Yeah.
and like they're half balding up top. It's
Right.
rough.
And so the triumph of that timeline when Vogue issued that magazine and that TV show was in its heyday, the triumph, that time period in our nation where the beta male triumphed also happened to correspond just perfectly with the time of COVID lockdowns, BLM, transgenderism, abortion at an all-time high, pretty much the worst things you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Right.
God did not design the world to be ruled by women, children, geriatric elders with dementia.
Mitch McConnell, hard hit.
Talking to you, Mitch McConnell, talking to you, Joe Biden, or weak, pathetic men who would struggle to bench press a pencil with 2 Fruit Loops on either end. God didn't design the world that way. So my point is, people say physiognomy is undefeated. I wouldn't say it's undefeated, but there is something to that principle. I don't think it's just ridiculous. And that's part of what we're trying to argue is that a true beauty for a woman is internal, not external. It's imperishable, doesn't fade, and it's beauty of the heart that is pleasing in the sight of God, which is defined by a quiet and gentle spirit. However, we acknowledge all that. But what the whole point of this episode, if you go all the way back to the beginning, is, and I think Wes did a wonderful job of kind of setting the tone, is saying that these two things, beauty in the external and beauty in the internal, there it is. Gosh, that's gay. That's so gay.
Is that Gospel Coalition?
I think that might be. So, anyways, but the point is that for men, strength in the physical and strength spiritually, and for women, beauty externally and beauty internally. What we're saying is that His good and natural design is not that these would be opposed to one another, but that there would be a correlation between the two. That there would be a natural transition from external beauty as it fades. There's also this uptake and increase in spiritual internal beauty. And for men, as your physical strength begins to fade, that it's also in real time in God's design being replaced with that crown, the silver crown of gray hair and spiritual strength and wisdom. And so, I think that physiognomy is not completely undefeated because I want to play the devil's advocate for a moment. Even Satan masquerades as an angel of light, right? And there are plenty of Hollywood actors that are externally beautiful or externally strong who are degenerates. So we're not saying that it's a 100% guarantee. But I think that the church has embraced that the opposite is a guarantee. And that's what I'm trying to push back on. I think the church has assumed that because you can be good looking and spiritually immature and immoral, then that somehow guarantees that the ugliest woman is going to be the most spiritually mature. Right, and the reality is, like I said, time heals all wounds is not true. Jesus heals all wounds, but he does so in time. Likewise, difficult providence that includes suffering and challenge, like a woman being less attractive physically than she would want to be, or a man being less strong physically than he would want to be, that does not guarantee that what you're lacking externally would just be automatically made up for internally, spiritually. It's what you do with the providence of God.
What the proper message of the church should be was that does not determine whether you can be spiritually strong or whether you can be spiritually beautiful.
Right.
So there is a hope for the downcast, right? Which is predominantly the message of Scripture. Mm-hmm. But that's a different thing than what you're saying.
There's exactly. There's a hope. So you're not. Your life isn't over if you're a quadriplegic.
Yep.
Your life isn't over if you're physically unattractive. There is a hope, a deeper hope. But that hope, just like the external, the physical, those things still have to be pursued.
Yep.
And so too with the internal, the spiritual, virtue has to be pursued. Virtue does not come automatically. So,
All right.
Any other questions that we want
There's
to
a couple
address?
more. Let's see if we can go rapid fire through them. Kenton Little, great guy, asked a question. What do y'all think about athletes as role models in the arena of physical fitness, specifically MMA fighters? Love it. They're strong. They're disciplined. They buffet their body the way Paul did. Obviously, of course, ideally that's married to spiritual virtue. But even when not, I think it's a good role model of just being disciplined. I'm going to do something. I'm going to strive. I'm going to compete. Chasta Elaine, do you all have some book recommendations on Christian nationalism for a 30-something pastor who thinks it's anti-biblical? There's a short book by Andrew Torba and Andrew Isker that's really good on Christian nationalism. Very high-level introduction. And then Stephen Wolf's magnum opus, The Case for Christian Nationalism. Michael, Joel, any other books maybe that are older that would just
there's one that's so new that it's not even on the shelves yet, but I do
that's
have a book
be
coming out
one.
in the next couple months. And specifically, I think Stephen Wolf's book is better than mine in every way, but mine is a biblical defense for it, where his was a classical theology defense for it.
Yeah, his was political philosophy from theologians, from the reformers and the reformed tradition, but yours is going to be more of the exegesis. That's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Corey, Jesus Christ is your God. Amen. How do you protect exposed sin in extreme UV areas?
Skin.
What? I said that right.
You said sin.
Yeah, you
I
said
meant
sin.
I meant skin. In extreme UV areas without using sunblocks. I'm speaking of endocrine disruptors that are in the most mainstream sunblocks. My experience is only TiO2 and or zinc oxide, ZNO, are effective here in the desert other than dressing like the...
I think that's from...
is it from Dune?
Dune, yeah, the Bedouin.
The Bedouin. No, Bedouins just live in
Bene Gesserit.
northern Africa.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Call it, Nate. Call
My
it.
bad. We're done. Shut the feed. Shut it down.
You can build up a tolerance. One way to do it would be using clothes, but then building up your resistance to it. Using zinc oxide is much, much, much more healthy than the endocrine disruptors. I would also add cutting out seed oils. So what causes a lot of the inflammation is the unstable omega-6s that are in these seed oils. The UV comes in and it's knocking off those unstable molecules, forming free radicals, which leads to inflammation, sunburn, all of that. So a good diet, moderated exposure, so not out for 8 hours, landscaping, nothing going on, no sunblock, no hat, no nothing. Moderate exposure, good diet, types of sunscreen when you need it.
The old-fashioned ones where you see the lifeguard with the white nose, that's better, right? Like that's a better product. That older,
yes.
I don't remember what the
then there's some of the translucent stuff that you would rub on. That's where you're gonna have to start, and you're gonna have to test your own tolerances for sun and everything like that. Joel, Josh's question is for you.
Where is it? Oh, Josh Pulver. He said, "Joel's a purple shirt retired." Josh, it absolutely should be. It is years old. It is tattered. It's worn.
Michael, we have a job to do.
It's a good shirt on camera.
But it is not retired, and it will never be retired, much to my wife's chagrin, much to Wes's chagrin. I will be busting out the purple shirt. Not as often, though. You might have noticed, I've seen a few people in the comments saying, hey, Joel is dressing a little bit better.
Lots of
people. Wes deserves all the credit for that. What happened was... I'm just going to share this. I've told some people privately, and they got a kick out of it. I'll share it publicly at my own expense.
This is bold.
That's okay, because I'm willing to laugh at myself. But this is what we did: was we decided, all right, Joel, you don't own a single decent suit, and you look like a ragamuffin. And so Wes has a keen fashion sense, and so he came over to the studio, and we met up one day. And I did not want to go shopping because that's just not what I do. So he was like, we can order it online. I've got these different companies that I use, but we'll have to take measurements. So Wes showed up with his measuring tape, and I think it's fitting for this episode because we're talking about masculinity and physical strength. And Wes is wonderfully gifted at motivating through mockery. And so he measured every single part of my body for these custom suits and shirts.
All it wanted was chest and waist, and I'm just doing all of it.
It's chest, waist. It was
asking for arms.
It was asking for biceps. Yep. So arm length, but also biceps. And all every single measurement, your thighs, everything you could imagine. And with each measurement, Wes would he'd take out the tape, he'd measure, and then he would go. He'd measure the bicep. A looking rough there, Chief. He measured. And then when we got done, he said, Joel, you only beat me on one measurement, waist. And then I said, I bet you I beat you on two measurements, waist, but also crotch. So there you go. There's the story. There's a certain point in the live stream where you just got to end it.
Oh, man.
Here we are. All right. Any more questions? Let's see.
Is all the winning via Trump executive orders increase testosterone? Yes, winning vicariously through a sports team, through national politics does at some level. You're not going to turn into a Chad overnight, but it does help promote it.
All right.
Yep.
Any other ones? Striker.
Nope.
Nate answered that. How can I find
Nate
others to
answered that
network
directly
with
in
from
the
my
chat.
State of Your Conference?
Yeah.
Sounds like that's something.
Yeah.
Opening night.
Nate made a
On
comment.
okay, so Nathan said on the opening night, and I think what we'll do is we've done like raising hands from states and stuff in the past, but I think we'll try to make it more helpful. Like go to corners of the room or something like that. Maybe we can even have Nathan a bunch of like name tags, so like on that night people can.
Well, their badge has their location on it.
Their badge has their location.
But nobody wants to read like Cal Grove, Arizona, or like.
Yeah, but once you're in the area,
Once you're in the area.
trim it down.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the first night, we're going to have an after party. And during that after party, what we'll do is we'll say, all right, everybody from this state go over here, everybody from that state go over there, and we'll split up, and then everyone will be able to, discuss with each other and also see the badges that get more specific down to, city. Okay, any
Great.
other questions? That's
That
good.
was it.
Go conquer. Go win.
Go conquer. Go fight. Win. Nathan, go back to the main chat real quick. I just want to see. Did we get any pushback for the end there with the saga of Wes and I ordering clothes? Nope, we're good. The people love it. They love it. It's a great. It's an endearing, charming story that my enemies will use to try to ruin my life. But here's the
Try
thing.
unsuccessfully.
They are going to try no matter what I say. So. Might as well have some fun. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. And Lord willing, we will see you guys again this Wednesday at 3 p.m. Central Time.